Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to cover more of what was included in the Inflation Reduction Act. Today, specifically, I'm going to cover part one of two, where we will talk about some of the residential energy credits available now. Many of these were set to expire at the end of 2021 or the end of 2023. In part one, I'm going to talk to you about the non-business energy property credit, which under the Inflation Reduction Act got a new name, which is the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Credit. And this is important because it was expanded to increase the limits that you were subject to. As part of the extension, there's really two parts to it. First, it was going to expire in 2022, so it wasn't going to be available. However, as part of the extension under the Inflation Reduction Act, it was extended and has the same rules as it did previously. So 2022, when we talk about that, this is also what the previous rule was. And then we're going to contrast that with 2023 through 2032 and what the new rule is. So in 2022 and previously, the credit was 10% of the cost of installing insulation, windows, doors, roofing, things like that. Or if you were installing water heaters, heat pumps, central AC, furnaces, hot water boilers, and air circulating fans, then it would be 100% of those costs. However, we can't stop here. There are limits in terms of the dollar amounts that you could claim each year. And there was also a lifetime credit limit. So changes for 2023 through 2032, it's now 30% of all costs. So you no longer have these separate categories where some are 10% of the cost and some are 100% of the cost. It's 30% of all of them. This is good in some cases and bad in others, obviously, depending on what improvements you are installing in your house. It was also expanded to include certain items like biomass stoves and boilers, electric panels, and home energy audits. One thing they did get rid of going forward starting in 2023 is that roofing and air circulating fans will no longer be covered. Now let's get into the actual dollar limits that apply, because while we have a percentage of cost that you have to take into account, then you have to apply the dollar limit. So here's where we get more of the benefit for these items, because previously the limits were pretty low. So in 2022 and previously, there was an overall lifetime limit of $500. What this meant was if you spent $500 on energy improvements for your home, not take advantage of more than $500 over your lifetime. So if you did it 500 in one year, you can't do another 500 the next year. And then there was also a separate limit of $200 for windows. So with the lifetime limit, there was not much you could take advantage of. And then there were separate limits for things like air circulating fans, where you could only take a credit up to $50. Furnaces and boilers were limited to $150, and water heaters, heat pumps, and air conditioning systems were limited to $300. So compare that to the credit starting in 2023, and we get rid of the lifetime limit. Okay, so now you have instead an annual limit of $1,200. So our annual limit was bigger than our lifetime limit. So now you can actually take advantage of some of these costs, and if you spread out your improvements a little bit, you can maximize it a little more since you're not subject to that overall lifetime limit anymore. And then there's still some separate annual limits for certain items, like home energy audits are limited to $150, exterior doors are limited to $250, or if you're doing multiple exterior doors, $500 in total. So for example, a rear door and a back door, you would only be able to get $500 for both. And now there's a $600 limit for items like exterior windows, skylights, central AC systems, electric panels, natural gas, propane, or oil water heaters, natural gas, propane, or oil furnaces. However, remember these credit amounts, this is after you're applying your 30% limit that we previously talked about. So you must take the cost of installing these items times 30%. So for example, if you did, say, 10,000 of improvements that qualified for this residential clean energy credit, you would take that 10,000, multiply it by 30%. So now $3,000 is your initial eligible credit amount. But then because you can only take $1,200 a year, Now that $3,000 gets limited to $1,200. It can also work the opposite, where, for example, say that you had $2,000 of energy improvements to your home that would qualify. 30% of that would be $600. So your initial credit's $600, but your annual limit was $1,200. Well, you're stuck with the $600 because that's 30% of your actual cost. So those are the big changes for residential clean energy improvements. Now, this is only for your principal residence, okay? This is not if you have a rental property or some other kind of business property. This would only be for your own residence. So that's an important piece to remember. The other thing is you're probably doing some of this anyway as you're upgrading if you're in an older home and putting in new windows or doors. So check if they qualify for these energy improvement credits, because it may just be an extra bonus, and so part of your cost is going to be covered. This is not the only credit available for your residential home, so stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to talk about another credit that you could take care of.